Welcome to our latest live event of the COP29 Virtual Ocean Pavilion. This year's pavilion is co-organized by the Global Ocean Forum and Plymouth Marine Laboratory. My name is Katie Mitchell. I'm a research assistant with the Global Ocean Forum, and I'll be here for any technical assistance during today's call. For all of our attendees, there is a question and answer box that's available at the bottom of your screen. You click the icon with a question mark that says Q&A. You'll be able to type in questions to our panelists, who will then be able to respond to them during the session. We also have translation available through Wordly. If you'd like to follow along in another language, you can enable the Wordly app, and you'll be able to view a live translation of everything that is spoken during the webinar today. And so with that, I will turn it over to our moderator of today's session, Dr. Peter Ricketts.
Thank you very much, Katie, and hello, everyone. My name is Peter Ricketts, and I'm a professor of Earth and Environmental Science at Acadia University in the beautiful coastal town of Wolfville on the shores of the Bay of Fundy in Nova Scotia, which is one of Canada's 4 East Coast Atlantic provinces. I'm also a member of the board of directors of the Global Ocean Forum, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this special session organized by the Global Ocean Forum, the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill in St. Augustine, and the University of the South Pacific, and also presented on the COP29 Virtual Ocean Pavilion. So whatever time of day or night it is for you, thank you very much for participating in this virtual event. The title of our session today is called Towards Greater Engagement of Regional Research, Academic, Environment, and Economic Institutions in Addressing Climate Change Challenges. So as the world marches steadily towards 1.5 degrees, we now live in the world of climate change impacts. And it is well understood that responses to climate change must extend beyond individual states and governments and engage a wide range of communities and individuals at all levels of society. Collaborative efforts are needed to address major ocean issues at the national and regional levels, and regional organizations and institutions play a crucial role in delivering ocean sustainability by enabling cooperation and coordination within and between academic and professional communities that extend beyond territorial and sectoral boundaries. As a former university administrator myself, I have always ensured that environment, sustainability, and climate change have been in the forefront of my institution's strategic plans, because I think it's extremely important that while individual professors and researchers will go about their work and do their jobs effectively, whether or not the president of the university says anything, it is important, I think, that leadership be demonstrated from the highest level to indicate how important environment, climate change, sustainability are to any institution in this in our current age that is serious about addressing the global issues that our students are facing. In addition to reducing our own carbon footprint and educating future leaders and contributing valuable research and expertise to the global effort to combat climate change, regional research and academic institutions provide policy-relevant scientific information to decision makers and stakeholders to address ocean, climate, biodiversity, and sustainable use issues in their respective regions, and must do so with increasing urgency and commitment to action. In preparation for a presentation at COP27 in Egypt in 2022, I identified 128 universities and 75 research institutes located in all continents that are recognized internationally as making significant contributions to ocean, marine, and coastal science and policy. Now, this, of course, doesn't include all of the institutions that do work on oceans and coasts, but it does indicate that there is a wealth of talent and expertise available around the world, and many institutions that are contributing to that effort. We are delighted today to have a small selection of that talent as members of our panel here today. And it is my pleasure to introduce them to you now, although I will be brief because their bios can be viewed on the event page on the Virtual Ocean Pavilion. So today I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Ladena Kanhai, who is a lecturer in the Department of Life Sciences at the University of West Indies in St. Augustine in Trinidad. Ladena teaches undergraduate and graduate students in the biology and environmental science and sustainable technology programs, and her multidisciplinary research is focused on understanding human impact on coastal and marine ecosystems and to advance the development of context-specific interventions that will contribute to ecosystem health and human well-being. Dr. Julian Walcott is a lecturer and coordinator of Tropical, Coastal and Marine Resource Management at the Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies at the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus in Barbados. Using his passion for the conservation of the environment and natural resources, Julian champions the role of enhancing capacities among young scientists across the region to aid in the quest for sustainable development. And I'm not sure if Dr. Dyer is with us. I don't think so. So I'll skip that for the moment, but maybe Dr. Dyer will be able to join us. Mr. Chris Corbin is coordinator of the UNEP Cartagena Convention Secretariat and Caribbean Environmental Program based in Kingston, Jamaica. Chris has spent over 30 years of national and regional program and project management experience, including improving ocean governance, marine pollution, and water resources management in the wider Caribbean region. Also, we were hoping to have Mr. Penny Suvenakama on the panel as well, but he's not with us at this point in time. So again, if they are able to join us during the session, I'll introduce him at that time.
Yeah. Penny just joined Peter.
Peter,
Yes.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good morning,
great.
everyone.
Excellent. So I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Penny Suvenakama, who is an oceans analyst and manager for the Pacific Islands Forum based in Suva, Fiji, focusing on leveraging the economic, financial, and social bargaining power of the Pacific Ocean and its resources. Prior to starting his current role in 2018, Penny held senior positions with the government of Fiji and at the United Nations, where he held the position of Second Secretary at the Permanent Mission of Fiji to the UN in New York. So I'd like to welcome and thank all of our panelists for agreeing to participate in this session, which will be in two parts, each of which will address a specific question. And the first question for our panel to address is the following. What is the nature of your organization's engagement in ocean climate action and the extent to which it is contributing towards addressing the many problems associated with it in your region? So I will ask Ladena to start us off, and then we'll give each panelist the opportunity to say a few words, and then hopefully we can have a bit of an open discussion with the panel before going on to the second question. So Ladena, if you'd like to lead off with some comments, it'd be great to hear from you, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Peter. So warm greetings to everyone from the Caribbean small island developing state of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm really delighted to be here, and I just want to highlight 4 areas that we here at the St. Augustine campus of the UWI are taking action as it relates to ocean climate issues. Those 4 areas are education, research, amplification of the Caribbean voice at an international level, and also coordinated action. So when I start with education, I speak about education at both the undergraduate as well as the postgraduate level. So in all of our programs, especially here at the Department of Life Sciences, in many of our courses, we are ensuring that our undergraduate students are intimately aware of the services that the global interconnected ocean provides us with. And then also how this emerging issue of a changing climate affects all of the ecosystems and this global interconnected ocean. Recently here at the St. Augustine campus, we've also had the Institute of International Relations launching specific master's programs in climate studies. And this is coordinated by Dr. Karen Niles. So at every level, we've infused ocean and climate issues. I then turn your attention to research. So I mean, we recently had the Principals Research Awards ceremony. It took place on Thursday, and then there was a conference on Friday. And across every single faculty, we have researchers that are invested in climate research, from people like Dr. Priya Mohan, that is looking at climate finance issues as it relates to SIDS, Dr. Sandeep Maraj, looking at the link between mental health and climate change, to people in engineering, like Dr. Deborah Villarreal-Lamb, looking at nature-based solutions to address this issue of climate change. But also we have some research that's being done on the other anthropogenic stresses that are posing a threat to coastal and marine ecosystems. So often we think of climate action and we think of research on climate issues, but we also have to address some of those other challenges that are posing threats to our ecosystems. For example, one of the projects that's recently coming out of the Faculty of Food and Agriculture is this RUBIC project that looks at strategies to reduce incidental capture of endangered, threatened, and protected species. So we've got a wealth of research going on here. And then I spoke about amplification of the Caribbean voice at international events. I know Dr. Balgus spoke about a gender session that happened previously, but I can say that we have some really incredible female professors here at the UWI that are advocating for Caribbean SIDS and SIDS in general. So we have Professor Michelle Maiku, who is leading, she's the coordinating lead author of the IPCC assessment for that focuses really on small islands. One of my mentors, Professor Judith Gobin, recently took part in the beyond the BBNG negotiations, so biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, right? So we have really world-class experts that are leading the conversation and advocating for SIDS as it relates to this issue. And finally, I'll just make a plug for the coordinated action. We've got JIGSID, and I have to read out their name properly. It says the Global Institute for Climate Smart and Resilient Development. So if you're looking for an expert, if you're looking for somebody at the UWI that's invested in action as it relates to climate issues, you can reach out to JIGSID because they sort of coordinate these activities. So Peter, I'll stop there and then we'll continue the conversation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. That's very, very interesting. So thanks for outlining those 4 areas. So Julian, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Peter. First, I want to express my gratitude to be able to be here today, albeit from Barbados, from the Caribbean, like Ladena. And similar to her, I also am from the sister campus, the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus. So a lot of what we do with respect to ocean and climate action, are the same. Now, I work specifically at a very small department within the University of the West Indies, which is the Center for Resource Management and Environmental Studies, known as CERMES. And its overall mission has been to make a significant contribution to the sustainable development in the Caribbean region, and thus to serve as an institution of excellence in environmentally targeted training, collaboration, and academic research with a strong focus on the Caribbean region. And so to that end, we offer academic training in natural resource and environmental management at the master's and doctoral level. And so this is coupled with a wide range of research. Our students embark on research which fall into the ocean and climate realm, and is conducted by students and staff to help to fill the knowledge and data gaps and to address the needs of the region, for example, by informing policy. And so within the program itself, we have 4 specialization streams, one of them being climate change, one being tropical, coastal, and marine resource management. We also have a land management and environmental resilience stream, and we also have a water resources management stream as well. So we really look at the holistic approach to tackling climate change and dealing with the linkages between the land and the ocean. In addition to these matriculated courses, we also offer short courses and training workshops to build capacity locally and regionally within the public and private sectors. So one of the pillars that we really stand on is trying to build the capacity throughout the region to be able to address and tackle the issues that we are currently experiencing with respect to climate change, especially within the ocean environment. And so to date, CERMES has produced several hundred graduates, many of whom now work or consult with environmental organizations in the public and private sectors, as well as several agencies of the United Nations. But apart from the academic training and research, the expertise of the staff that we have at CERMES has also influenced the region through the numerous projects that we have collaborated with or on across ocean and land. And so we've had significant collaboration with governments, academic institutions, non-governmental, and community service organizations. So really just to summarize the work that CERMES has been doing regarding the ocean climate action, we've been providing graduate students with advanced training in mechanisms and techniques, policies, etc. We've been facilitating and conducting relevant and pertinent research to speak to policy issues, challenges. We've also been providing guidance, consultancy, and professional services to regional governments, NGOs, the private sector, and the like. We've also hosted and coordinated regional initiatives and projects. We also recognize the importance of public awareness. And so we've also embarked on a number of outreach activities to heighten public awareness with respect to climate change, the linkage to the oceans, solutions and stuff like that. And we've also been building capacity of the private sector and decision makers within the government realm through the development of short courses and training workshops. So thank you, and I'll hand back over to you, Peter.
Great, thank you, Julian. You must be exhausted doing all that. That's that. But
we have a quite competent team, but yes.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and I love the way that you're linking, the science to policy to public awareness, to public education, community action, and sort of finding those incredible linkages between communities and different stakeholders in the area. So that's fantastic. Thank you. So I think Chris, I think you're going to be up next.
Thank you so much, Peter, and a warm good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever anyone else is in the world. And to start off by saying I'm going to approach this from a slightly different angle because I represent one of the regional multilateral environmental agreements, the Cartagena Convention, with the overall objective being the protection and sustainable development of the Caribbean Sea / ocean. So we were one of the family of regional seas programs. We've been established since 1986. And interestingly, when I read through the convention document, there is absolutely no mention of climate change. So I think part of our work over the last 30, 40 years now is really on strengthening that nexus, that link between ocean and climate change. Significantly, the issues or the problems that our governments in the wider Caribbean saw are still the same problems that we have today. Pollution from land-based, marine-based sources, biodiversity degradation, overfishing, and climate change, sort of the umbrella issue, which is impacting on all of these. So what have we been doing? I'd also sort of pick up a little bit from Ladena in terms of some key areas of focus. And one of them is really working towards support governments in changing their existing policy, legal, and institutional structure. Very much governments had a very sectoral-based approach in not just addressing the environmental issues of pollution and marine biodiversity conservation, but also how do you respond to climate change? So part of our work has really been, how do you start to better recognize the impacts of climate change on conservation of marine biodiversity, on pollution prevention, and how can we ensure that whatever interventions that we are doing and we are supporting with governments is actually also climate resilient and climate proofed. So a lot of our work has been on strengthening that policy, institutional, regulatory structure. Secondly, a significant effort and focus on capacity building and training. Less so in the more formal sense, like within a university setup, but more working with government practitioners, government technocrats, and community-based stakeholders. What are some of the activities that they can engage in at a very local level that seeks to promote the sustainable use and protection of coastal and marine resources, but more significantly now also doing it in a way that brings into context a climate change adaptation measure. So a lot of our capacity training, I would say, has evolved over the years as well to bring a greater recognition to what are some of the issues relating to climate change, but also the importance of ocean and coastal and marine biodiversity in actually building resilience to climate change. And that brings me to maybe the third area of focus for us as a regional multilateral environmental agreement, and that would be interventions at a national level, a community level, a local level that build resilience to local communities. More recently, our efforts have then shifted more, as was mentioned, I think the use of nature-based solutions. How can that be both a climate resilient intervention or climate adaptation measure, but also help, for example, with reducing pollution, also help, for example, with restoration of critical habitats. So that has been an area we have looked at. We are actively promoting tools such as marine spatial planning, ecosystem-based approaches, again, by focusing on our key thematic areas of marine biodiversity and pollution, but doing it through a climate change lens. And then finally, I would say part of the effort has really been promoting more multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral approaches. And I think our scientists on the call here represent the sort of engagement we are actively promoting with many of the governments. This is not an issue that can be addressed by a fisheries unit or an environmental unit only. It needs to bring on board private sector, the civil society. We need also to have different types of scientific analysis. So currently now we are working on state of reports that are less sectoral focused. So not only a report on the status of pollution or the status of biodiversity or the status of fishing, but rather doing, I think, undertaking a more integrated, holistic approach so that the governments, the stakeholders, local communities, the general public can actually better see the linkages between climate change and what they do for a living, whether it be tourism, whether it be fisheries, etc. So those are some of the areas that I would say that we've been working on and really trying to enhance and strengthen that ocean's climate link. And back over to you, Peter.
Great, thanks very much, Chris. It's that was very striking when you said, looking back at the convention and not seeing a single mention of climate change, and of course that's something which it speaks to the fact the Regional Seas Initiative was one of the earlier approaches to promoting collaboration around coastal, marine, and ocean resources and environment and sustainability. But the fact now that it's like everything, climate change is completely not taking over, but it's putting the new context to everything that we do. So thank you very much for that. And now Penny, we'll move to the South Pacific and welcome you, Penny from Fiji, to speak to us on the question. Great to have you.
No, thanks very much, Peter, and also what an honor it is to be here with esteemed panelists from particularly from the Caribbean, from the Pacific. I understand that maybe Jack was supposed to join. I understand that the University of the South Pacific, as our colleagues from the Caribbean had mentioned, they have in the University of the South Pacific a number of programs that have been put in place for children, for the students to look into this particular issue of ocean climate nexus. I understand also that there is a program by the Norwegian government providing PhD scholarships for Pacific students, looking specifically at this nexus between the ocean and climate. I'll be speaking also from a slightly different context today. I understand that academia, there's programs, and also we've heard from Chris. For us, the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner is sort of the coordination office on oceans. I'll be talking about some of the practical issues and challenges we face in relation to dealing with this particular issue of ocean and climate nexus. Now, for us, it's a practical issue because our region is sectorally organized. So, you know, we have the SPREP looking after the climate change. We have the scientific aspects are looked after by the Pacific Community Organization. And then the fisheries is looked after by the Forum Fisheries Agency. So we're very sectorally focused. When the multilateral instruments are finalized, so usually it goes under the carriage of one of these sectoral regional organizations. Now that presents a challenge for us, particularly when you are looking at the nexus. It means that the different sectors will need to be talking to each other more. Unfortunately, when you look at this is something that we as the Ocean Coordination Office are looking at. When you look at the SDGs, they are basically compartmentalized, the ocean goal, the climate goal. We've had in the Pacific region recently adopted the 2050 strategy. And unfortunately, we have sort of like slipped into the same situation where we have sort of had a goal on climate and a goal on ocean. Of course, it provides ambition, but when you look at the interlinkages, it presents a challenge. Even when you look at the UNFCCC process, the fact that you know, these are two distinct communities, the ocean community and the climate community, which we need to bring together, especially from our region when we're looking at it. So for us, our role is basically that it takes time, but we are sort of shepherding the communities to come together and talk together. Our region is not so big on science. It's something that recently our political leaders have sort of pronounced themselves to ramp up science in line with the decade. So we're looking that in the next few years, at the political level also, we're pulling them, given that we are also part of the political organization that looks after the political agenda for the region. We are also trying to ensure that it's not an overnight thing. It takes time to change the mindset of the region looking at this particular issue. But specifically in terms of the ocean and climate nexus, what we do is we coordinate the messaging for our leaders. So as a region, we try to come together as we prepare for COP. We come together and develop the messaging for the region in relation to the ocean and climate. So that I can say mainly is one of the roles that we play here, particularly at the Forum Secretariat, but at the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner. I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much, Peter.
Great. Thank you very much, Penny. And thank you, each of you. I think at all of our different levels, whether we're working in academic institutions or research institutions or coordinating agencies, UN, government, intergovernment agencies, I think this nicely reflects the sort of layers of collaboration and integration that need to be addressed as we're trying to make our maximum contributions towards addressing climate change issues. Certainly in my own institution of Acadia University, the picture behind me is our main old University Hall building. We located in a very small town, about 5,000 population. We're on the shores of the Bay of Fundy, which have the highest tides in the world, at between 11 to 13 meters, depending on the time of year, and we're facing a lot of the same issues in terms of climate change impacts, sea level rise, increasing severity of storms, whether it be mid-latitude cyclones or tropical cyclones, and hurricanes coming up, and we're also facing the events such as increased flooding, increased wildfires, all sorts of things happening. And as I listen to you talking about what you're doing, it's very much, but no matter where we are in the world, we're facing similar issues, similar regions, and similar problems of lack of multi-sectoral approaches and coordination, and also the issues of how we empower and build the capacity of our communities to deal with this, because they're often the ones that are most at the forefront of the impacts, but often the least integrated in government action. So very, very good to hear from all of you. I don't know if before we move on to the second question, if any of you would like to comment on some of the things that you heard. Or would you like to move on to the second question, and then we can get into a more open discussion at the end?
Maybe Peter, just a
Chris,
very
yes?
quick comment. I was trying to raise my hand, but I couldn't find it.
Oh,
I
yes,
actually think something that we are very keen on, and perhaps the avenue of flow of the work that's being done, for example, through the universities, through the academic and research sector, how that actually really better informs our policy making at the national level. In some cases it does, in other cases it doesn't, and part of the role that we see ourselves as a regional body, and also a number of other intergovernmental organizations, we speak so much about bridging the science policy divide, and we talk about it all the time, but I'm not sure how many mechanisms actually exist to make it happen. And I think it's an area that is getting better, but I would say probably does need some more focused work to ensure that the work of the number of scientists that I know are doing excellent work in our region actually influence some of our policy decisions as it relates to climate and oceans.
I think that's a great point. I could jump in, but would anybody else like to respond to that? Because I think that goes to the heart of what many of us in universities are trying to address. And certainly, from my perspective as an administrator, that was something that was very, very important to our strategic approach. But before I say anything, maybe some of the other panelists, and if you want, you can just wave your hand because I can see you. You don't have to look for the little icon. So there's not so many of you that I can't see a hand waving if you want to speak. Does anybody want to comment on that? What Chris has just said, because it is a challenge for us. Still a challenge. LaDana, I think you're muted, maybe.
Yes, thanks, Peter. I was going to raise my hand, but I was just going to say, Chris, I completely agree with what you said. As sort of an early career scientist, that is something that we are all, grappling with in the academic community. How do we ensure that the science that we are doing, it's actually, because we have credible evidence, how do we ensure that that is actually going to inform policy, and not only inform policy, but that decisions will be taken based on that science. For example, I can speak about the issue of plastic pollution. I know we're going off topic here, right? But that's one of the areas that I do research on. How do we ensure that the governments, the decision makers, use the findings that we have to take action? I don't have an answer for you, but it's something that I say, yes, we need to address.
Yes, I can echo the same sentiments. Academic institution, we recognize there is that divide, of the science actually being used to inform decisions. And I think one of the things that we are recognizing is there's a greater need for how information is communicated. We found that before we used a kind of one message fits all type of audiences, but we're really recognizing that even when we talk about decision makers, there are decision makers at different levels, high level, middle level. And so one of the things that we recognize is that we really have to cater the information that we are sharing to the decision makers, which might make it more palatable, easy to understand, and allow, for decisions to be made. So that's something that we are really trying to work on in tailoring how we kind of try to get this information into their environment so that it can be meaningful and actually utilized. Thanks.
Right. Yes, thank you. Yeah. I mean, the truth of the matter is that that the academic institutions are as siloed as government, right? And we have the same problems of that creates as it does for government. And as with government, the mechanisms to try and break down those silos are often very difficult to bring in because they're sort of clashing against the very traditional boundaries that people place around their expertise, but also it clashes with the way in which people's performance is evaluated, right? So one of the big things that I think of where I've seen successful attempts to do this is where you really tackle the sort of in the university context, the promotion and tenure criteria to make sure that that interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and community engagement is recognized, even for pure scientists who are working in the field. And I often have said that climate change sort of negates the entire concept of the ivory tower, because the days when university professors could say, well, we don't need to muddle with the community or the society because we need to work in isolation and just pursue the science, and that's just no longer acceptable anymore. And what does give me hope, though, is that when I see the professors that we've been hiring over the last sort of 10 or 15 years, how different they are in approach to maybe the ones that were hired when I was hired initially as a professor. And I do think that instilling that sense of the value and recognizing the value and rewarding that in the reward system, where you are seen to be giving value to your discipline, even if you are addressing issues that are beyond the scope of the pure science that you might be working with, and building in the recognition of community engagement, of communications, working across interdisciplinary borders, and developing interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary programs, such as we heard from sort of Ladena and Julian earlier about how important it is to build the program so that we get our students and our teaching, education to be multidisciplinary and cross-disciplinary. And so those are really, really good points that have been raised. So as we, I think that sort of neatly takes us into our second question, which is, what measures should your organization take to leverage the ocean climate biodiversity interlinkages to maximize its contribution towards addressing the challenges associated with a changing climate in your region? And I don't know if we could go in reverse order. I don't know, Penny, if you'd be willing to lead off on that question. I can repeat it if you want, I think, but it's really talking about how as a as an organization or institution, how do you really are you going to tackle this issue of the nexus and the challenges associated with climate change that are happening right now?
Well, thanks, Peter. Yes, I'd be happy to jump in at this stage. As mentioned earlier, of course, the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner is a coordination office, not a technical one that may look into issues that specifically contribute towards addressing the challenges facing climate change. But one thing I can say is from the coordination perspective, for us, we have sort of started to move towards better organizing the stakeholders present in our region. So we've taken steps to start to better organize when there's a new player coming into the region. We want to ensure that they are well acquainted with those that are doing existing work in the region, that they come and talk to those stakeholders and not just come in and start off doing with the work. So in a way, for us, as partners start to come in to do work in our region, we of course ensure that the intentions align with the priorities of our leaders. The priorities set in our region for our leaders, including on the ocean and climate nexus. So in a way, when the partners come in there, and I can give a few examples, there was a few philanthropies now present in our region that do incredible work. They do the scientific work, as they do work on marine spatial plans, as they do work on marine policies. We ensure that all these aspects are looked into. So I guess those are some of the things, some of the measures that we are doing to leverage, and also the OPOC office is leading coordination for the Pacific in terms of BBNJ. So of course, in relation to biodiversity, as a new place come into the region, they do marine expeditions. They have the capability to do expeditions within jurisdiction on biodiversity. We also encourage them to look into the high seas within the Pacific. But in relation to climate change, I think this better organizing our stakeholders and just ensuring that all these aspects on ocean warming, the monitoring systems they want to put in place within the various parts of the region. These are some things that we ensure that there's a much more broader consultation done, including our sectors. The fisheries sector is important for the Pacific. So just making sure that the people involved are part of the discussions or are on the table, and that the projections on the impacts of climate change, sea level rise, and also the impact on biodiversity, the migratory paths of the tuna. Those are aspects that our leaders have interest in. So we ensure that once those modelings are done, that those information are filtered right through to the leaders for them to make the decision. I guess that's one aspect that we are looking at the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner. Thank you, Peter.
Great, thank you very much, Penny. Chris.
Thanks, Peter, and maybe just building up a little bit from Penny. I guess the easy answer would be we want to generate more financial resources. We want to have more projects actually being implemented at local level, at national level, building more resilience to climate change and probably being more integrated in nature. So we don't just have a climate change adaptation project, but we have a project that at the same point in time is livelihood generation or habitat restoration or pollution prevention. So that would be the easy answer, I would say, because it's not that easy to do that. And I think part of where we see ourselves going as a secretariat, as an organization, is that we have crafted in our latest strategy four pillars of governance, of knowledge management, of biodiversity conservation, and of pollution prevention as sort of four umbrella pillars that we want to work on in terms of developing activities, strengthening the capacity, and doing it in as much as possible as in a holistic and integrated manner. And I think as a regional IGO, not the only one, so I think part of our strength is a convening power, which we have, as was mentioned, bringing together multiple stakeholders from governments, from regional organizations, from development banks. So at least there's a little bit of harmonization in what we do within our region as the wider Caribbean. Caribbean SIDS, I mean, I don't think anyone can argue, remain at the forefront of climate change. Coastal communities that are heavily dependent on tourism remain at the forefront of climate change, and climate change is just impacting the entire SIDS community, both the Pacific and the Caribbean, in major ways. So I think there's an opportunity now, as a lot of our governments are talking about ocean-based economies, blue economy, to use it as an entry point where we can take advantage of that climate, biodiversity, oceans link to really accelerate the type of financial support that we need to work with universities, to work with private sector, to work with governments. And maybe that's probably the final point I'd like to end up on is how can we, even though we are intergovernmental body responding to governments, how can we more actively partner with civil society, with private sector, with academic and research communities? Because we are seeing the siloed effect there as well, in terms of the types of solutions that we need, which need to be integrated, which need to be holistic. And at the same point in time, we have to create almost a new generation of thinkers. And that's where I look at Ladena and Julian, because it's really about then how do we bring in the social scientists, the behavioral change scientists, the economists, none of which I am, but I'm finding myself, as I design new projects that we're doing as a secretariat, we can't only focus on the environmental side of things. We have to figure how are we going to present something to the new change makers that actually resonate. So those are some of the areas that I would say that we would be looking at moving forward in terms of that. And maybe just finally, this is the first set of COPs that I've heard so many ocean days and someone else's COP. So there's an ocean day in the biodiversity COP and a biodiversity day at the climate change COP. And maybe it's a start of recognizing that even the global MEAs, as much as they've been developed to address a particular global issue, the solution is not within their framework only. So we need to integrate. Back over to you, Peter.
Great, thank you very much. And I think that's a very good line then to ask Julian to comment on. We need to integrate.
Yes, definitely agree. So in terms of what measures as an academic institution, I always like to emphasize first, even before going there, that when we think about maximizing the contributions towards addressing these climate challenges, within our regions, it really requires an all of society approach. A lot of times, they look to the government, the environment departments, but it really requires an all of society approach, which, as has been mentioned, with multi-sectoral type of interventions, where we really bring together these unique partnerships to tackle the issues holistically. But from our perspective, I would say that, today's rhetoric to start incorporates terms such as large ocean states. So we're moving from the narrative of small island developing states to large ocean states. We're talking about the blue economy. We're also talking about data-driven decision-making and evidence-based decision-making. And these last two would suggest that data are really, and information are really at the heart of the decisions that are being made to tackle these climate-related challenges that we face in the region. And so I would say that with this, a key measure for us as an academic institution would be to continue to work to fill the knowledge and data gaps that are required to address said challenges. As Christopher said, we live in an ever-changing world. Sometimes the data we collect today may be outdated in a year or two. So we always need to be filling the data and the knowledge gaps. And I also like to stress the importance that when I talk about data and knowledge, it's not just the scientific and expert knowledge, but it also speaks to the local and indigenous knowledge, which is extremely important, for our decision making and tackling these issues. Now, since CERMIS is a multidisciplinary department, as I said, we encompass the terrestrial, water resources, coastal and marine, resource management, climate change, social sciences. Another measure that I think we could also take would be to continue to promote and encourage the concept of multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, and larger seascapes and ecosystem approaches. So things such as ecosystem-based management, ecosystem approaches to fisheries, integrated coastal zone management, and so on. So moving from the silos and the sectors to really recognizing the connections, reef to reef, for example, and not just in the sectors, but as was mentioned, academic institutions working together, be working with UNEP, CRFM, regional entities and bodies as well. And so I think things like that could be achieved through our continued building and enhancement of capacities throughout the region, through the updating and the development of both matriculated courses, so what we offer to students, but also through short courses, webinars, and so forth, in addition to peer-to-peer learning exchanges. And then I would conclude by saying that one of the last measures, but by no means the least, that I would mention is the promotion of greater collaboration and networking, theme that has been emerging from all of the panelists. And this is both within countries, but also among countries throughout the region as well. And I think what is emerging is the need for public-private partnerships, not just government agencies working together, private entities, but we really need government organizations, non-governmental organizations, community-based organizations to really partner together to be able to tackle the challenges, that we are facing. And so it's extremely important that we have these and build these collaborations and networking, because in the Caribbean, for example, we have very limited resources. And so we really need to try to minimize the duplication of efforts and maximize the limited resources. And this goes back to my point, and this is where too the communication of information is extremely important, because there's a lot of work that's being done in the Caribbean, but it's not being communicated. And this in itself leads to duplication of efforts. And so one of the measures is better communication of data. In itself, how that is put out there, visualizations and the like, better communication of science, as we mentioned before, to decision and policy makers, but also communication of things like best practices, lessons learned, solutions, and also failures. Because I think a lot of times we don't like to talk about failures, but there's so much to be learned from failures. And so I think these are some of the measures that we as an academic institution, CERMIS, can continue to try to maximize the way that we tackle, the climate and ocean related issues that we see today. So back over to you, Peter. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks very much. Those are really, really good points. And I think when we're looking at that whole issue of how you communicate scientific research and social science research and humanities research as well. Again, it comes back to breaking some of those hard, fought traditions that people have about what are the right journals, what are the right outlets for academic publication, which ones give you the most prestige when it comes to going for promotion or tenure, anything like that, and changing those constraints, right? Which but changing them without creating the notion of diluting quality and diluting expertise, because it's a very difficult balance. And I think both government and And just listening to all of you, whether you're working with government agencies or universities or commissions, all dealing with that same issue of how do you balance this need for multidisciplinary, multisectoral, cross-cutting approaches, while at the same time being true to the quality of the science that you need to understand those things, right? And all of that. So it's a really difficult balance. And Ladena, you must have the answer for us.
Well, I certainly don't have the answer, but I have some suggestions.
Yes, some possible answers.
Some suggestions. So, just building on what my co-panelists sort of said, I think we have work to do. We've done a lot, but we still have work to do. And I think in terms of some of the measures that we can take, and I speak from the perspective, first of all, from academia, like Julian did, is I think we can enhance our education and training. And what do I mean by that? Well, a curriculum that was designed 30 years ago would not be a curriculum that you would use in 2024. And I speak from the perspective of my department engaging in curriculum review at this point in time. And we have this incredible opportunity to infuse some of these things, some of these concepts into our courses. For example, under the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Report, we have that terminology of ecosystem services. Now, as a result of IPBES, we have nature's contribution to people. So our students need to be informed of those things. We would have been discussing integrated coastal zone management at one point, but now there's been a shift in the conversation to marine spatial planning, right? So all of those things, we've had the terminology of blue economy come up within the past couple of years. So all of those things, need to be infused into the curriculum that we're using in 2024 and beyond. And like Julian said, we also have this unique opportunity to provide training to experienced professionals, especially as it relates to this nexus ocean climate biodiversity issues. I think right now, Julian, in Barbados, there's the CAMPAM training program that's going on. It's train the trainer program. That's a program, and it's being held at Sumis, is it? I'm not sure.
Not at Sumis. It's offsite, but it's being held at a hotel. But yes, Sumis is part of the hosting, and we're now moving into week 2 of it.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That's what I saw. But really,
Yeah.
it's professionals from across the Caribbean that are being trained as it relates to marine protected areas. So, if we can get that sort of training out to persons from the region, that's a great initiative. And I think many of my co-panelists would have spoken about this, moving from the silos into interdisciplinary research. So Chris, I hear you when you say we need the social scientists. Recently, I collaborated with some environmental psychologists. So when I approach plastic pollution, I approach it from how much is there, quantification, impacts, that sort of thing. But actually, plastic pollution is a people problem. What is driving behavior? So I had to reach out to my comfort zone, but sometimes that's the best place to be because you're with people that have expertise beyond what you have, and then you come up and you say, that's what it is, right? So definitely moving to interdisciplinary research. At COP29, one of my colleagues, Dr. Leticia Addison, she was actually awarded a prize, the AI Innovation Grand Challenge winner. So I think she pitched for the project, not pitched the project, but she presented the project at COP29. And her project was on AI-driven climate resilience for SIDS. So utilizing AI as it relates to, climate resilience in small island developing states, so moving out of the boxes that we've placed ourselves in, finding new ways to address the issue. And then I think, yes, I talked about amplification of the SIDS voice at international events, but we can do that. We can strengthen that voice, and I think just by being here, all the panelists have and the organizers have actually demonstrated in a practical way, that the SIDS voice needs to be amplified as it relates to this issue of climate change. And then I think the final thing I want to say is, and many of my co-panelists would have spoken about it, but it would have been about engaging local communities, you know, the people on the ground, the people that are living, you know, and they can see the sea, the people that are out there every day, the fishers, for instance. These people hold traditional ecological knowledge. They're holders of indigenous forms of knowledge, you know, and if you are trying to address an issue, these are the people you want to engage, and not engage at the end, but engage from the beginning of projects. So I'll just kind of pause there. Peter, I'll turn it over to you. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Gosh, there's such a lot coming from all of you. It's such a rich discussion, and just speaking to this kind of need for cross-cutting multidisciplinarity. So next in the winter term, I'm taking over the coordination of a course that we have here at Acadia that's been running for a number of years now, called climate change for environmental practitioners. And in the past, I've given a lecture in it on oceans and climate change. But in that course, we bring together. Each class is taught by a different professor from a different discipline. So we have people from biology, from earth science and environmental science, from psychology, from food science and nutrition, talking about food insecurity, from sociology, talking about anxiety and mental health, from history, from political science, and it's really fascinating to see all the different, and community development, because we have a program in community development, which is in itself an interdisciplinary program. And we also have a program in environment and sustainability studies, which does that sort of cross-referencing between the humanities and the social sciences and the professional and the we have someone from business who speaks about climate change and business and insurance and things like that. It's fascinating just to see how many disciplines now are in fact being drawn into by climate change into looking at that climate change through their lens, and also using climate change as a lens through which to reevaluate their own discipline, which I think is very, very interesting. Would others like to respond to some of the challenges that we've heard here? Yes, Chris. Yeah, you see, I can see you.
I can wave my hand now.
You can wave.
I actually just wanted to maybe highlight two additional points. One reflected what Julian talked about, that current course, and for the sake of our listenership, there's currently a capacity building training looking at the effectiveness of marine protected areas. But it was interesting that there were, and Julian can correct me, I think it's 5 different organizations who all had that as an activity under their mandate or under a project. And I think part of it is us collectively as agencies, wherever we stand, being willing to actually work together to, you know, pool resources. So in fact, we are able to have a much bigger, I think at the end of this week, a much more impactful event because of all of the different agencies, first of all, knowing that they're working in the same area. And I think it's something similar to how we have to approach ocean biodiversity, climate change, because there's so many of us working in that area, but we are off doing our projects and off doing our mandate, our decisions, or our training, and not necessarily always talking to one another. So I just wanted to reinforce that point. And then secondly is to touch a little bit perhaps on the South-South and the transboundary cooperation. We have a colleague from the Pacific here. I mean, it's when we get together, I say we because I am also from a small island, not to discount my colleagues in Central America, but when we do get together, it is an opportunity for SIDS from different regions to have a much stronger voice. Even as a regional sees convention and action plan, we are also part of a family of regional seas. So we can benefit from what's happening in Europe in the Barcelona Convention, what's happening in SPREP in the Pacific, what's happening in the case of West Africa in the Abidjan Convention, because we have impacts of sargassum that are coming across the Atlantic. We have impacts of plastics. We have impacts of nutrients coming across, Sahara dust coming across. So I think part of what we can do collectively at a regional level is also look for alliances so that when we come to these global COPs, we have a much stronger voice as a grouping of different regions. So just a thought in terms of some of the, I guess, addressing some of those challenges. Over.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. Anybody else want to comment? Yes, Julian.
No, I just wanted to echo what Chris said on the point of collaboration, because it is true. Without the collaboration of the different entities, the current training programs, I think there are 20 students, there are 20 participants. And each of these organizations kind of have different geographic scope. And so we were able to bring persons from throughout the region. Without them, the course might have been 6, 7 students. So it really emphasizes, and this is a good example to show how coming together and pooling resources could have a much greater impact. And that is the type of, scenario that we really need to play out more and more, where we pool resources to be able to get greater reach, greater impact. So just wanted to say, totally agree with that point.
Thank you. Any other points that people would like to raise? I did look. I don't think we have any Q&As coming in on the Q&A, but
I have a question. I have a question, Peter, and it's,
yes,
I guess to all of us as well. We are aware that our governments that we represent, in this case, the Caribbean, probably the similar in the Pacific, normally have challenges effectively participating in negotiations at the global COPs, whether it be for climate change, on oceans, on biodiversity. And I see potentially a role for us collectively, particularly drawing on the academic research experts to guide, inform, provide some capacity support for our negotiators when they go to these global events. I don't know how it's done over in the Pacific, if there's a sort of a grouping and everyone comes together with a position paper. I know when I used to attend some of these negotiations, I must admit we were not well coordinated as a region. I know there's a bigger effort in our region now for some of the intergovernmental bodies to do that, like CARICOM and so, but I'm just wondering, is there room for us to do that a little better as well, to ensure that when there is global negotiation, that the specific oceans, climate, biodiversity issues that are specific to regions are actually put on the table in a meaningful way. So again, I guess a question, comment, maybe for my colleagues, my co-panelists.
So you almost saying capacity building for negotiations. Well, that's very interesting because, I mean, when I first got involved with the Global Ocean Forum, with Liliana Sisson-Sain, the focus, there was a very clear focus on getting the oceans onto the negotiating table at climate change. And I remember how incredibly important the voice of Fiji was in that, with the ocean pathways. And the it was almost like Fiji had this you talk about sort of punching above one's weight class. It was, they had, the small country in the South Pacific, and yet it was having a very powerful, I thought, voice in terms of presenting this cause for SIDS, and how critical it was for oceans to be in that formal negotiations. And of course, eventually that happened with COP25, and that was a great example, I think, of where there was collaboration of negotiators, because it wasn't just Fiji. It was a Fiji was leading it, but it was bringing together all of the parties to say, look, these are the key points that we need to be, the negotiations need to be hearing these key points from all of us, and we all need to be on the same chain, and it worked. And I think to your point, now that oceans are in there, and there are kind of mechanisms, there's the Ocean Climate Platform now, which is sort of leading the way. There's the ocean dialogues, which are there, but at the same time, there is a discussion, and we've had this discussion in the Global Ocean Forum about, what's needed to kind of not just keep the oceans on the table, but to actually expand the deliberations, and to expand it beyond just formal recognition. So I think that's an interesting point. And I was thinking of, just before you spoke, Chris, there was sort of, asking you all what you felt an organization like the Global Ocean Forum could do to help in addressing this situation. And it wasn't specific, the one that you raised, Chris, but now that you have raised it, that idea of collaboration and capacity building for negotiations to determine, what are the key points that we need to be continually pounded on the table, time again, in order to get things moving forward. That maybe that's a role that something like the Global Ocean Forum could play. I don't know, but just a thought. Anybody else have ideas?
Let me thank our dear colleagues. I would say with no embarrassment that I don't think the Caribbean were at the forefront of championing oceans as much as our colleagues from the Pacific. I think we have now a little bit come on board, a little more, I would say. But I would definitely say the Pacific, Fiji, and colleagues were really at the lead in terms of ensuring that. So thank you. And I think now it's really an opportunity for other countries and other regions to similarly bring on board ocean issues. Not that they are now on the agenda, but as you say, what are we doing with the fact that we are on the agenda? What are the issues?
What are we doing with the agenda?
What are we doing with the agenda? I mean, I don't know if there's a role for any of us in the UN Ocean Conference coming up but again, just thinking aloud, that may be something that we see. Is there something that we put on the agenda there, or can the Oceans Forum contribute to that in any way? I don't know if you're planning to be there, but I just wanted to throw that out before.
Yes. Yeah, no, we are, and one of the interesting things about that is, of course, when you talk about, we were talking about silos earlier. There was another silo of, the SDGs over here, and UNFCCC over here, and the Ocean Conference talking about one, and UNFCCC talking about the other. But actually, I mean, at the last Oceans Conference, the one in Lisbon, climate change was a huge part of that conference, because it was the first kind of meeting post COP25, and I think there's a great opportunity at the upcoming one next year in France to to have those broader, because in some ways you're not constrained by the legal framework of the convention. You have greater flexibility as to what you can talk about, and certainly the Global Ocean Forum is going to be present at that. And maybe this could be an interesting point of discussion, is that how do we want to use being on the agenda? How do we get that to have its maximum impact? That's an interesting point. Yeah. So any other thoughts on that?
I'm not a panelist, Peter, but I would like to say something. It will be remiss of me if I don't mention that the Global Ocean Forum is actually executing a project on cross-sectoral ABNJ management. So
Absolutely.
we are actually addressing the points that a number of you have raised, particularly the point that Christopher has raised about cross-sectoral perspectives in ocean governance. Although we are focusing our efforts on areas beyond national jurisdiction, we are trying to put together a conceptual framework that we can have discussed among stakeholders to see how we can develop capacity so that those who are involved in ocean governance, particularly in areas beyond national jurisdiction, now that countries are focused on the ratification of the BBNJ agreement, will have that kind of a perspective in working together, starting from their pre-ratification and ratification and implementation activities. So we are actually helping put together that a capacity building program, particularly for the Southeast Pacific and the Pacific Islands region. And we are in the process of developing a conceptual framework for cross-sectoral ABNJ management. And I would like to advertise that we're going to have a roundtable discussion on this tomorrow under the Virtual Ocean Pavilion. So we're addressing it, Global Ocean Forum as an executing agency along with global and regional partners. And also we are providing a venue for others to put in their perspective on how to go about doing this. We're not necessarily getting ready to help countries to have that cross-sectoral perspective in the negotiations, but we're trying to help countries develop that kind of a perspective going forward, particularly now that climate has to be always a context for everything that we do now. And so with the nexus of ocean, climate, and biodiversity, it has become all the more important for these sectors to come together. So countries now have what they call, for example, in the Pacific, Solomon Islands have an Oceans 11. It's like they have this committee of ministerial representatives coming together to deal with ocean issues. And some other countries have like Oceans 7 or some other number, but we're going there. But I would like to actually recognize that the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, particularly the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner, is actually leading in the path towards developing coordination and collaborative mechanisms for that, and to mention that actually they are a partner of this project that I have just mentioned. So something's going on in these two regions towards addressing the issues that you have raised, but there's like Ladena and Julian said, where we have so much more work to do. And you have your own this comparative advantage in how to use all of those in moving forward in development of this kind of collaboration. So thank you. I didn't want to speak because I'm not a panelist, but I couldn't help myself.
No, actually, we're into more open. You're not a panelist, but you're a participant. So we're into that sort of piece now of question and answer and open discussion. And actually, I really did want you to speak about the BBNJ, because it is an interesting example of what we've been talking about, because you don't have national boundaries, right? So, or at least not, well, no, you don't have national boundaries. And, but you could easily slice and dice it again, right? You could easily take a sectoral approach and slice it up and say, well, we'll look at seabed, we'll look at columns, we'll look at fish, we'll look at mining, we'll look at shipping, and we'll look at them all separately, as we typically do for these things. Or you could take a different approach and use the cross-sectoral approach, and of course, in this case, you're forced to do multilateral, multi-governmental approaches. So creating that framework, which can then be saying, what can we learn there that we can apply into areas that are under national jurisdiction in terms of approaching, I think is a great example of how we can, you know, change our thinking, because, you know, as we've heard from everybody today, you know, those are the big challenges that we're facing in making sure that our own organizations can have the maximum impact that we can possibly have on addressing climate change. So no, thank you, Miriam, for
may I say a little bit more, Peter?
Yes, you may.
I don't want to be remiss in saying that actually the University of the South Pacific and the Office of the Pacific Ocean Commissioner are the two regional organizations that are helping us in carrying out this project in the Pacific Islands. And it's the CPPS, Comisión Permanente del Pacífico Sur, and the Universidad Católica del Norte, who are helping us with this project in the Southeast Pacific. So we are the very motivation in organizing this event is actually that we started thinking about emphasizing the role of regional organizations and wanted to highlight what all of you are doing now and how you can do a lot more in promoting cross-sectoral approaches in ocean governance in the context of climate change. So we're very thankful for all the wonderful perspectives that have been brought to light in this event. So thank you, Peter, and the panel for being here.
Thank you very much. So, well, Miriam, thank you very much. We're at that time now where we need to wrap up. So maybe I'll just give, if I have time, Katie, does each panelist sort of have a 1 minute kind of thing? What's the big thing that you're thinking of as we end this session? And I could put somebody on the spot, or somebody could volunteer to.
Okay, I'll volunteer one thing.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm already thinking, how do I get a Penny or Miriam or Julian or anyone to actually present on some of these lessons and best practices during our own meetings, which are either technical government focal points or more policy political level focal points, but don't often have the opportunity to hear how is it being done in the Pacific? How is it being done elsewhere? What are some of the scientists finding? Scientists in this case from our region. So I think just providing a platform or for us as a regional body, being able to provide a platform that allows input and sharing of experiences, not just from the usual suspects, but from a much broader grouping of friends. Over.
Thank you. Thank you. Penny, do you have a burning point at the end here?
Well, from my end, I mean, you know, just to get back to that COP discussion on the ocean climate nexus, of course, the Pacific Fiji was president of the COP, which launched the conversation, but I guess it was the Alliance of Small Island States, which included the Caribbean as well. So we were all part of that journey, and I think that success is owed to all of us. But also just to mention, I think this point that Chris has been making is a critical one, and I think we will need a framework to facilitate cross-sharing of lessons and cross-sharing of at different levels. It appears that you know, our government representatives engage through the intergovernmental platform through the Alliance of Small Island States, or AOSIS. But of course, this could trickle down at various levels. We need to ensure that we are sharing with each other and learning from one another's experience. And I think the cross-sectoral project, you know, I think this is the initiation stage, but you know, we need to start looking at that, where we can create a platform where all levels can come in and engage and share with one another. I think that's a biggest point that I take out from this particular conversation. Thank you very much once again, Peter, and thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you. Julian, any last word from you?
Thanks, Peter. So the session has been very, informative. I think we had some good discussions, a lot of useful material. I think the last point I would make, and it was mentioned, I think Chris mentioned it, is one of the things that's underlying all of this is the financial component, because nothing at the end of the day really happens without financing. And so that's also a key part when we think about these collaborations, development of frameworks, peer-to-peer exchanges. We also need to have the sustainable financial mechanisms to really support the interventions, the collaborations, the actions that we really want to see on the ground to be able to get the results and impacts that we want. So I would just leave with that thought. And again, thanks for the opportunity. Always a pleasure to be able to discuss among colleagues, some of these pertinent things. So thanks.
Thanks very much. Well, Dana, I will literally give you the last word.
Thank you
Words.
very much. Thank you very much, Peter. I think the thing that I'm taking away from this panel discussion is that we cannot do it alone, and we need to collaborate with each other, whether that is collaboration among Caribbean SIDS, or whether that is collaboration with our Pacific SIDS or whoever. We need to collaborate together. We have a lot of work to do, and we cannot do it alone. So whether that is Julian getting funding, we can do it together. So we will reach out. We will also reach out to Chris as well. But that really is what I want to, and I do want to thank Miriam for reaching out and for the opportunity to participate in this panel discussion. And I learned a lot from my co-panelists. So thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I do want to thank all of you for participating in this session. It's been enlightening and engaging, and a very enjoyable way to spend an hour and a half, whatever time of day it is for you. I'd also like to particularly thank Miriam and Katie for both the coordination and organization and logistics to bring the panel together. And thank you very much for doing that, and for giving us the opportunity to engage with each other and to come up with some interesting thoughts and ideas that we can take away and look for further action and follow up at a later time. But we are now certainly coming close to that time where Zoom will probably cut us off. On that note, I'll just say thank you all very, very much indeed, and wish you all the best for a good day or a good night's sleep, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Peter.
Bye.
All the best.
Thanks, everyone.
And thanks
Thank
all
you,
the
Peter.
participants, all the listeners.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.